The secret number for Lesson 7 is 0.2. Lesson 7, Singing in Different Environments. The text and some of the supplemental videos talk more in depth about acoustics, but essentially the idea is that any environment in which you sing is going to sound different than any other environment. For example, right now, as I'm recording this, I'm recording it in a recording studio, which is a very small room with a lot of sound dampening material on the walls so that there isn't a lot of reverberation as it goes on. Now, any type of acoustical environment is going to exhibit different challenges for the singer, and if the singer is doing it acoustically, meaning without any type of amplification, knowing how to deal with each of those environments is imperative. If you're using amplification, it's a completely different animal, and again, we talk about that more in some of the supplemental videos. But for example, if I'm trying to sing in an acoustically dead room, similar to this one, I am going to have to work harder to try and keep my mind engaged and keeping everything free, because since the sound dies so quickly, like this, the brain interprets that as being all of a sudden, well, I have to sing louder because I can't hear myself as easily. In a live room, the other challenge that happens is the fact that since it is so live, people have a tendency to then think about all the nice pure sound that's being created, but completely lose track of the fact that since it's so live, we lose a lot of the consonants and a lot of the communication of the words. So the more live the acoustic, the more you have to work on your articulators to make sure that all the words are being pronounced accurately and effectively so that the audience can hear them. The more dead the room, the more you have to think about being mindful of not over-singing, causing tension inside of your throat. Now, in amplification situations, everything changes because you're now going through a totally different scenario where you're using a system. And I talk about this in more detail both in the text and in some of the supplemental videos, but essentially the two major issues I want to just demonstrate for you is microphone technique, what to do, what not to do, and I'll use my hand as the microphone. So for example, if I'm using the microphone here, and I'm demonstrating, so for example, if I'm using it here, and this is the microphone, it's turned on, I'm singing along, and all of a sudden, as I'm singing, all of a sudden I start to move the microphone away. The sound changes, and if I move this microphone closer, it does this. Now, if you have a sound technician that's following along with you, they're attempting to compensate for that, but they can only do so much. And then if they build up too much power, the sound starts to overload and you get that feedback sound, which sounds like this. You don't want that. So you don't want the microphone to be too far from your face so that they have to turn the power up too much. Likewise, you don't want the microphone to continue to move as you're singing because the sound technician can't continue to adjust the sound to keep you going. The other situation that people have besides the hand gets tired and it moves away from the face that way, is that the microphone right up against their mouth. As you put it up against their mouth, this is an extreme example, but essentially it muffles the sound so that you can't do a lot of the types of things you can do with the technical sound, and you lose a lot of the communication. Now, one of the other problems that people have is that when they're moving around a room, they have a tendency to change where the microphone is sitting because they're not following it with theirs. So you always want the microphone to be where the head is 4 to 6 inches from your face, and it's always in the same position. Now, if you're on a microphone stand, that's a little easier, but what if you're trying to do stuff and you're moving around while you're trying to do that? Or what if you have a headset situation? Well, then that totally changes the scenario. You can move your head all you want. For example, I have a lapel mic. I could, if I'm speaking here like this, it's giving one sound, but if I were to start to speak like this, it totally changes the sound. Or if I were to speak like this, it totally changes the sound. Moral of the story is you want to make sure that you keep that consistent sound so that people forget in a way that you're actually being amplified. In giant stadiums, amplification becomes an interesting scenario because you get what's known as lag time. So the sound is traveling from the speakers to your ears while you're singing, and you actually hear it as a delay. This throws a lot of singers off, so you need to always be mindful that if you're in a scenario like that, to follow what you know and not just what you hear. Also, if you're trying to coordinate with other singers and there's a distance between you, or you know there's a distance between you and the audience and there's some need to make sure that they know exactly where you are. You have to be mindful of that lag time. One of the major issues that some people have when they change venues is that they don't do some type of a sound check before they begin to sing. So then they don't know how to troubleshoot the scenario. You always want to do some level of sound check, if possible, before you have to sing in a particular scenario. So if you're in an environment where this, say the audience isn't there yet, you want to do the sound check and you're like, okay, that's great. However, you have to be mindful of the fact that when the audience arrives, the sound is going to change. The audience themselves, as people, are going to dampen the sound. So the sound will not sound the same with no audience as it will with an audience. So you just always have to be mindful that, again, the more live the environment, the more articulators you have to use to communicate the sound. The more dead the environment, the more you have to be mindful that you don't oversing and create tension.